Horcruxes, a magic so dark, so evil, that few in the wizarding world know about them, and even fewer dare attempt them. A magic that would cast a shadow over the world of Harry Potter. We learn what a Horcrux is through Horace Slughorn's memory. It is an object in which a person conceals part of their soul. The reader learns that committing murder splits the soul and that there is a spell that encases the torn piece of soul in an object. Voldemort created 7 Horcruxes, a feat never before achieved in the wizarding world. Only one other wizard is known to have created a Horcrux. The ancient Greek wizard, Herpo the Foul, was the first known wizard to create a Horcrux. He was also the wizard credited with breeding the world's first basilisk. In Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, we learn that this process is not permanent, that there is a way of putting one's soul back together.
"Remorse," said Hermione. "You've got to really feel what you've done. Apparently, the pain of it can destroy you." Hermione gleans all of her Horcrux information from Secrets of the Darkest Art, a book she took from Dumbledore's office after his death.
She indicates that the book gives explicit instructions on how to make one, but of Horcruxes and their nature, that is all we learn. We see them in action in Chamber of Secrets with the diary, and again in Hallows with the locket. We know how they operate, how they twist and poison those who come in contact with them. But the actual process for creating a Horcrux remains a mystery. In an interview with Pottercast in 2007, J.K. Rowling said,
"There are 2 things that I think are too terrible to go into detail about. How Peter Pettigrew brought Voldemort back to a rudimentary body, and how you make a Horcrux."
Later on in the interview, Rowling stated that the Horcrux making process is grotesque. All of this mystery surrounding the darkest art have led readers to come up with their own theories as to the process of making a Horcrux. One of the most popular theories proposes cannibalism. The theory was originally suggested on Reddit by Sir Lionel 13. Cannibalism has been seen as a way to gain strength, to absorb the power of a defeated enemy, or to absorb that person so that they will always be a part of the consumer, forever. Sir Lionel theorizes that the murderer's soul would need to connect to the departing soul of the victim in order for that piece of soul to be torn from the body to then be placed inside of the chosen object. Voldemort would have needed to consume a piece of his victim's flesh. They also suggest that in order to bind the bits of soul together, Lord Voldemort would have performed some kind of necromantic magic on the flesh. Necromancy is the branch of magic that utilizes the dead, most commonly seen as reanimating the dead. Voldemort would consume the flesh of his victim, thus connecting their souls. As the soul left the victim's body, the fragmented piece of Voldemort's soul would be ripped out. Voldemort could then perform the Horcrux spell to encase his bit of soul in his chosen object. Cannibalism certainly fits the grotesque bill. It's seen as one of the greatest human taboos, and Voldemort has demonstrated that he has no problem disrespecting the dead by creating an army of Inferi. However, it is important to note that necromancy specifically is never mentioned in the Potter books. Inferi are discussed and explained, but necromancy itself is not touched upon. There are 2 flaws with this theory. Firstly, all of Voldemort's victims' bodies are described as unblemished, that the bodies had not been manipulated in any way. Voldemort could have covered any mutilation of the bodies with magic, but magic always leaves a trace. So if he had done anything to the bodies, it certainly could have been uncovered. Secondly, this theory suggests that the departing soul of the victim would need to be connected to the fragmented piece of soul in order for that fragment to be ripped from the body. Necromantic cannibalism would also require that Voldemort consume the flesh right before or as the soul of the victim is leaving the body. The act of the murder would leave very little time for Voldemort to remove flesh from the victim, perform a necromantic spell, and consume it, all before the victim's soul leaves the body. But the departure of the soul from the body seems to be instantaneous once Avada Kedavra is performed. In Chapter 34, The Forest Again in the Deathly Hallows, the moment Voldemort kills Harry is described as, "He saw the mouth move and a flash of green light, and everything was gone." The next chapter, King's Cross, begins with Harry immediately conscious and laying on the floor. To us, this indicates that death is instantaneous, and so is the soul leaving the body. One moment, Harry is alive. The next, he's waking up in King's Cross at the departure point for his soul. That means at the moment of death, his soul left his body to go to this in-between place where he chats with Dumbledore. Further evidence for this idea is shown by Sirius earlier in The Forest Again, when Harry asks him if death hurts.
"Dying? Not at all," said Sirius. "Quicker and easier than falling asleep."
This further cements the idea that there just isn't enough time for necromantic cannibalism before the soul leaves the body of the victim.
Cannibalism is very taboo, a gross violation of the deceased body. But Rowling and her editor has not shied away from this. Nagini controls and erupts from a decaying Bathilda Bagshot, which means violating the dead along with visceral physical gore does not push the grotesque boundary too far.
Our second theory gets a little more plausible. This theory comes to us from writer Scott Wilson on his website. This theory also claims that the best way to rip out the split piece of soul is to attach it to the departing soul of the victim. Mr. Wilson theorizes that the Horcrux-making act is a kiss. He cites the ability of Dementors to suck out souls with their kiss, and that a similar type of magic could capture the departing victim's soul and attach it to the ripped part of the murderer's soul. A kiss is one of the most intimate acts of love, and if murder is what rips a soul apart, then certainly love would bind two souls together. Therefore, an act of love could be perverted to pull out the ripped part of the soul in order to encase it in the object. Mr. Wilson connects his idea to the image of the Dark Mark and the Death Eaters themselves. The Dark Mark is an open-mouthed skull with a snake coming out of it. An open mouth could be presented as someone coming in for a kiss, but in the case of the Dark Mark, it is a snake coming out, ready to strike, to kill. Another perversion of this specific act of love. He also notes that Rowling chose to call Voldemort Death Eaters. Voldemort's goal is to conquer death, so why not call them Death Defeaters or something? Death Eater could also imply a perversion of kissing. Voldemort would in essence be basing his symbolism and following on his Horcrux-making act of kissing. Wilson's article is very convincing. He provides a lot of background and evidence to support his theory, and perverting an intimate act of love in this way does sound like something Voldemort would do. However, this theory doesn't sit quite right with us either. The biggest flaw for us was that if this is true, that kissing is the act, and all of Voldemort's symbolism is based around that, it doesn't quite work. Voldemort would not be so daring to advertise the fact that he's made Horcruxes, even in these subtle ways. Not many people in the wizarding world know about Horcruxes, but we know that Slughorn, and certainly Dumbledore, know. Hermione found secrets of the darkest art in Dumbledore's office, so we know that Dumbledore knew how Horcruxes were made. Just another secret that he kept from us. Dumbledore had suspicions for a long time that Voldemort was making Horcruxes, but did not get direct confirmation until Chamber of Secrets. Voldemort would certainly not want to leave any clues for Dumbledore to follow and to find out about and potentially locate his Horcruxes for destruction. The elaborate lengths he went to in order to protect the locket demonstrate Voldemort's desire to hide his Horcruxes. It therefore seems like a contradiction that he would then create a symbol that could be displayed almost like a giant clue up in the sky for everyone to see. Moaning Myrtle is another wrench in both of these theories. In both of these theories, the key is to perform an act that binds the ripped part of the soul to the departing victim's soul. Moaning Myrtle remained a ghost. She never went on. So how was Voldemort able to pull out the piece of his soul after murdering her if the key part is committing a vile act to bind the murderer and victim's souls together? Nearly Headless Nick says that becoming a ghost is to be a mere shadow of what you were. It's never fully explained how that pertains to your soul departing, but what is clear is this. If you choose to remain as a ghost, then your soul has not fully departed and you have not truly gone on the next great adventure that is death. And if that is the case, Voldemort could not have used Myrtle's departed soul to pull his own out to encase it. The process would have gone awry somehow. And the diary is arguably Voldemort's strongest Horcrux because it was his first and contained his most stable piece of soul. So the process would have had to have gone correctly. A kiss doesn't seem like it would fall under grotesque, at least not too grotesque to be included in the series. If the spell is much like the Dementor's kiss, we do hear about Barty Crouch Jr. receiving the kiss, and many times we nearly see it performed. But this does bring us closer to our final theory. Listener be warned. This final theory is adult and kind of gross. Our final theory comes like the first from Reddit. Arctic Turn for the Worst posted their Horcrux making theory and it caught our attention. Their Horcrux making act is a sexual one. They point out that all of the Horcruxes are significant objects to Voldemort, trophies of a sort. This is analogous to what some serial killers will do with their victims. They'll take something from the victim, usually something small, like a bracelet, something innocuous, and use that object to later relive the ecstasy of the crime. Oftentimes, this is the only way that these murderers reach orgasm. So Arctic Turn for the Worst suggests that creating a Horcrux requires something similar, and that Voldemort would need to reach a stage of ecstasy in order to prepare the ripped soul to be contained in the object. This is quite in line with who Voldemort is as a character. Voldemort is a psychopath that has developed a sexually sadistic side. He has an overinflated sense of self-importance. He sees himself as separate and above from the rest of humanity. He shows no desire for companionship or physical intimacy. Bellatrix was right there the entire time, and he never showed desire for her. Cursed Child is not canon. However, he does understand sexual desire. He believes this is all Snape had for Lily. This, Arctic Turn for the Worst theorizes, is the clue that Voldemort is a sexual sadist. He understands sexual desire, but he doesn't have any in a conventional sense. Voldemort is also depicted at his most joyful when he is subjugating, hurting, and torturing. This could suggest this is how Voldemort derives pleasure. Sexual sadists come in many forms, and in their most extreme, can only have sexual pleasure through violence alone. Voldemort could be this extreme. Voldemort's Horcruxes were specifically chosen and of significant importance to him, and in The Half-Blood Prince, it is revealed that Voldemort's penchant for collecting trophies was already established when Dumbledore met him in the orphanage. He kept objects belonging to the children that he had hurt, and this was way before he even knew what a Horcrux was. It's a clue that, even at a young age, Voldemort displayed a tendency to enjoy hurting others and collecting mementos or trophies in order to relive these moments. So it would be no real leap to conclude that he became more intense and extreme as he grew. To us, this third and final theory seems to be the most likely to be the correct Horcrux making act. There's no bonding of souls here. We think that Voldemort would be reviled at the idea of having to bond souls, even temporarily, in order to create a Horcrux. Both cannibalism and kissing are intimate acts and a perversion of very human acts. But they are still very intimate human acts. However, a sexual act involving one of his trophies is as far from the human spectrum as you can get, being so far removed from humanity that the only way you can achieve pleasure is to use an object to relive an act of violation and violence is inhuman. It definitely fits the grotesque bill, and then some. It's vile, it's repulsive, it's secretive. There is even another way to look at it. When most people want to secure their legacy, a very human response is to have children, but Voldemort has transcended that which is human. If he wished to continue his legacy, he would create a Horcrux, impregnating an object with a piece of himself, creating his legacy. His Horcruxes then become very much his children in their own way. You don't need to have real children to continue your legacy if you can never die.